Hi everyone, it's Jan from Jan Plans Things and welcome to my Plan With Me video for this week. So I'll be setting up my May bullet journal and I'm just doing things a little bit differently this time around. You'll see me put in the text on the left hand up in the top, you can see that coming up now, what materials I'm using while I'm drawing with them. So hopefully that will be helpful. The other thing is I had a little bit of a creativity slump this week. I just couldn't for the life of me decide what theme I should do. So in the end, what I actually did was decide to do a little bit of a just whatever makes me happy theme. So I've got Humphrey in his adventures this month. And I think the other thing is that I wanted to also practice drawing different characters or like a different style of cat. So this is like Gentleman Humphrey. He's got a little bit of a suit and a bow tie, and in the spreads that I'm doing, he's just going to be traveling around and just in different kind of like a dreamy and whimsical situations. The other thing is this is the first month where I've decided to skip doing the mood pages and the ideas dump page because I'm finding that I'm using them less and less and they're not as helpful for me. So I'm kind of just doing like a bare bones setup, which only has the cover, the monthly spread, and then a weekly. And I'm just going to see how that goes for me. Plus the other thing was with the creativity slump, I wasn't really kind of feeling creating a lot of spreads this week. I've also been very time poor at the moment, so I had to make it a little bit easier on myself. I've also tried to, on the top left, show you what colors that I'm mixing so that you can kind of get an idea of how I'm achieving each of these colors. You'll notice that for most of the colors, I'm mixing them with a neutral tint. You can also use a warm grey. If you don't have a neutral tint, you could probably mix it with a burnt sienna and ultramarine, which are kind of like staples in most palettes. That's how I've done it in the past. I've just become a bit lazier and I'm using a bit of a neutral tint instead to darken the colours. The benefit of using the burnt sienna and ultramarine mix is that there's no black in it, so you don't get that kind of sooty look. If you see that I'm painting with various darknesses, and that's basically I'm just adding more water to the paint mix, and that kind of gives it that lovely marble look. Sometimes you'll see me putting just water by itself onto a puddle which already has a little bit of watercolor on it. That's so that I can get that lovely marbling bleeding look, and I find that that works very well on the Leuchtturm because the paint sits on the surface so much. I find that that doesn't work with the Archer and Olive because the paint sinks down, so you can't really get that that type of effect. It's kind of as close as you can get to a wet on wet effect with a regular watercolor paper, but because you can't really keep the paper soaked, you do have to vary your technique a little bit. This week as well, I've decided to mix my my Coliro golds, the Finetec pigments, with a little bit of the Holbein gouache, mainly because the Holbein Brilliant Gold Gouache has really large gold particles in it, and that means that they kind of float to the surface. So they're really good if you want to mix them in with other colors, because it kind of just gives it this lovely like glittery shell look that I quite like. So I'll be using that as well. Surprisingly, this set of drawings is probably the fastest set that I've done in a really long time. I don't know if you simplify everything down, and you've noticed that I'm not really drawing a lot of detail into it. I'm drawing mostly everything's achieved through just doing like the circular cloud washes, which I explained. I think it was like my March theme where I did the stars. So that's the type of technique that I'm using, and by doing that I can fill a lot of the page, but I don't have to spend a lot of time painting detail. So these spreads all took me under 40 minutes each, which is really good, I think. Normally they take me around 50 minutes to an hour and a half depending on complexity, but this was actually pretty fast to film, which is probably a testament to how much I've improved firstly, and how easy it is to achieve this type of effect, just painting simple circles over it with varying intensities of the paint. I am also skipping a page after each because I've decided to line everything with my Pentel pocket brush pen. The Pentel pocket brush pen does not play nice with the LT paper. It does bleed through. Every other thing that I'm using doesn't. So You could bypass the skipping if you use a Sakura Micron instead. The thing was, it was a lot about speed for me this week, so using the brush pen means that I can very quickly and easily get variation in the lines. The microns are much more technical pens, so that when you draw with those, you don't really get that like bunch of ink. You can redraw it in, but you don't get it naturally. So I find that having that little bit of variation makes it look a lot more lively, and the line work just a little bit more interesting. Although the technical pen look is, of course, the architect's way. So if you do prefer that look, it's good for you. Also means that you don't have to worry about it bleeding through the LT. So the other thing is, so for the monthly this time, I've done it a little bit differently. I've got a big balloon with Humphrey looking through a spyglass in the center, and then I've got a ribbon that's flying off the balloon basket, and on that ribbon I'm going to put each date, and I'll just draw lines towards each date to do the what are they called, the scheduling that I need to do. I always find that the monthly I can play with the most because I do very short entries on my monthly, things like pay rent, pay water bills, so you don't really need long and detailed entries. That's more reserved for the weekly or the daily spreads if you do them. So this is kind of more like a master list, so I can have a little bit more fun with this because I don't actually need that much space. I'm also finding that if you are painting these types of clouds, it's really good to have like the darker colors just behind the really detailed drawing that you're doing. So I have my darker colors really towards the center because it attracts your eyes inwards, and it means that it just does a little bit more contrast. So you'll find that I'll be painting most of the dark against the figures. So I've got them in just behind the clouds and the balloon, and in the previous one just behind the boat. It just makes everything pop a little bit more. So I guess the other thing was, I think I've mentioned in the past that one of my big goals was to do a children's book. So I'm seeing this month as kind of like practice for me in drawing that kind of style and just developing the characters. So I do like using my bullet journal to practice those types of things because it's not really limited to like any certain theme any one month. So I'm trying to do that and then maybe spend a little bit more time just painting, because I would really like to just get into that a little bit more and doing some more illustrations. Now, for those of you who haven't entered my giveaway yet, there's still 1 week left to go, and I'm giving away 108 Tombow dual brush pens for my 100k milestone on my Instagram. So if you go to my Instagram or the link in the description, you'll be able to enter there, and it closes next weekend on the 4th of May. So just look out for that one. I'm really excited and I'm really glad that I can offer that to you guys. One of my big things at the moment is I'm trying to index all of my watercolor paints, and I'm trying to learn a little bit more about each of the pigments. So I will do a video for you guys in the future after I finish swatching all 300 colors. And then because I'm finally noticing that a lot of the pigments, they use similar pigment numbers, but the way each manufacturer makes them, the paint might move differently through water. So after I've done a collection of those, I will definitely show you guys just a little bit of difference between each of the colors, and then whether or not I need to buy any more. Probably no. 300's a lot. Probably never need to buy colors again. And yeah, so that I'm hoping that will be interesting for you. This is kind of like this month's 3 spreads. I'm finding it a little bit like Jan's greatest hits. I'm kind of incorporating the things that I've really loved doing the last couple of months, and then using those styles and techniques that I've learned within this spread design. So I'm going to try and reincorporate things that I've really loved painting, like for example like a couple of the animals as well, and I think because with such a loose theme I can do that. I've also wanted to make sure that I wanted to use like a kind of muted color palette. We're coming into winter, we're still in autumn here, but it's cold. It is so cold at the moment, and I'm finding it like a nice steely grey theme is kind of really suiting how it looks at the moment, so I'm quite pleased with that. I thought that spread was really cute, by the way. I hope you guys like that one as well. Now this one, I decided to draw Humphrey sitting on my favorite whale. You guys might have remembered one of the very first videos I ever did was like a golden whale that that I did a weekly of, and this is kind of like just the development of that, where I've got Humphrey sitting on it as well. And the thing is, like, this is obviously not to scale because I've drawn a humpback whale and they're huge and cats are not that large. We'll call it a giant, no, not a giant cat, but a baby whale. We'll go with that. It's okay. It's magic. So yes, I'm using the same palette basically and all the same colors just to keep everything as cohesive as possible, because even though I'm changing up the drawings in each spread, I'm keeping the same color tones. It kind of still makes it look like one cohesive thing, even though most things are quite different in each spread. Even though I'm drawing skies in the other ones, this one I'm drawing water, but I'll use the same blue. It kind of just all matches a little bit more, which I find very effective in just tying everything together. So that's that. I've been trying to also work out what my essentials are. You'll notice that during my videos I can kind of use the same things over and over again because I'm starting to be quite comfortable with the types of things I'm using, and what I'm more experimenting with nowadays is paint. As I'm learning my essentials, I'm finding that I'm repeating myself a little bit more, but I think it's kind of good also because you kind of learn what you really love to use. So my old faithfuls have started to stay, so things like the Sakura Micron pens, the pocket brush pen. The funny thing is I find that I use the pocket brush pen less when I use it in the Archer and Olive, even though the Archer and Olive paper is much more suited for that type of work. I think it's because on the LT, with the water sitting on the surface of the paper, I feel like I need to be moving a lot faster. With the Archer and Olive, you kind of have to layer up the color a lot more so that it looks a little bit more vibrant, because it sinks down and the fiber of the paper is quite strong and it comes to the surface. So the thing is, with this, because it's the vibrancy of the colors happens so quickly, you can move quite quickly as well. That being said, like the pages that I did for my Archer and Olive journal, if you go to my Instagram, you can see a flip through of the pages. They do look like a little storybook because of how much time I spend just building up the colors and the layers. And so the paintings themselves in that journal for me are a lot more controlled. What I'm doing now is I'm using a pink sponge to lift some of the color off because I wanted that marbled look. I'm already using a black from Greenleaf and Blueberry, which is the Magnetite, which is a super duper variating color. It has a lot of movement in it. The pigment tends to clump together, which already creates a lovely texture, but by sponging it off, I kind of exaggerate that a little bit more because I want the whale to look a little bit rough. I can't actually wait for the pigment to sink onto the LT, because in that case it'll clump a little bit too much because it sits on the surface and I don't want the paper to buckle. That's why I sponged it off, to kind of expedite that process. I think you find me talking a lot about the differences between the two journals I use because I find that you do have to alter your technique depending on what the paper is or the medium is. So my favourite watercolour paper to paint with is a hot press watercolour paper. It's nice and smooth, but you can't use that type of technique for every single thing that you paint with. If I'm painting on the Hobonichi, which is much thinner, I'll use even less water than I am now. I'm actually quite loose with my LT. I put quite a lot of water on there because I know it kind of just sits on the surface because of the coating. So unless I buff my brush into the surface of the paper and remove some of that coating and it does sink through, it is quite forgiving. There is ghosting though, which I don't mind so much. Bleeding I can't stand, but ghosting I'm fine with. But I know a lot of you don't like that. That being said, in comparison, the Archer and Olive, which is an absolutely lovely notebook, has all of the pigments sink straight down through the paper. So that means you have to alter your technique. So that sponging technique that I just did, where I dabbed off all the paint, that would not happen on the Archer and Olive because it absorbs the ink so much faster. And then that means that, by ink I mean paint, that means that I wouldn't be able to sponge it off fast enough to get that effect. So just experiment with what you're using. Not every medium is the same. If you're following this along with me, it might not be as easy to achieve because the materials are slightly different. But yeah, there was only 3 spreads this month. Sometimes you have a little bit of a down month for creativity, but I actually was so happy when I finished all these. I thought everything looked so cute. A smiling Humphrey makes me pretty happy as well. And I really hoped you guys enjoyed that video, and I'll chat to you guys next time. Bye!